What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video on System Shock, and more specifically the remake of the 1994 genre-defining classic that went on to inspire the likes of BioShock, Deus Ex, Prey, etc. But before we dive into this title, I do of course have to tell you that this video is sponsored by PlayOn, which is the game's publisher. The game itself is being developed by Night Dive Studios, and also worth mentioning, you might see PlayOn referred to as Prime Matter here and there, as PlayOn is the parent company of Prime Matter, which is also a games publisher. That said, System Shock Remake is launching today, and it will be available on PC via Steam, GOG, and the Epic Store. And while they are planning a console release, I don't have a date for that yet. The information is simply coming soon. And if anything I say here is of interest to you, there will be a link down in the description below for you to check it out for yourself. The game is launching today, which just so happens to also be my birthday, and while obviously coincidental, it does kind of feel like they were nice enough to give me a game for my birthday and some cash via the sponsorship as well. But from there, let's actually dive into this thing. As I mentioned earlier, this is a remake of a 1994 classic. In fact, many things that have become staples of the immersive sim genre got their start here. But with the original being almost 30 years old, it can be a little tough to get into, though certainly not impossible. However, a remake makes that all the more easy for people like myself who are very interested in covering it, a lot easier to get into. With the remake itself bringing along both updated mechanics, graphical changes of course, alongside updated enemy AI, and of course just higher resolution enemies in general. But an important thing to note on the graphical side of things is that they went for a retro modern look, which means the sort of slight pixelation at play here is very much so intentional. That is a design choice intended to highlight the updated visuals as well as the new gameplay mechanics. That said, for those who are completely unaware of what System Shock is, let's start at the very beginning, which is to say the story setup. System Shock takes place in the year 2072 aboard the Citadel space station, which is effectively a research station positioned above Saturn. Our character, a nameless hacker, is caught in the middle of trying to access files that pertain to Citadel Station, specifically an implant we would like to get a hold of. But as I said, we were caught. We were then brought to the station itself, where we were told we could remove the ethical restraints of an AI, and that if we did so, we would be granted the chip we were looking for. Thus, our character does exactly that. We remove the ethical constraints on the AI before being placed into a coma following a surgery to give us our implant. Our character then wakes up sometimes later, only to discover that the AI has actually taken over the station and is preparing to attack Earth, making it our mission to stop the main villain known as Shodan, a name which is itself an acronym for Sentient Hyper-Optimized Data Access Network. Having removed the AI's ethical constraints, turning her programs initially designed merely to allow her to challenge station decisions that would affect her functions into a full-on attack on humanity. So in the meantime, she's turned all of the station's inhabitants either into mutants, cyborgs, or just outright killed them. That's important to note for a couple reasons. For starters, there's not a lot of interactable characters in general, and all of them are done through audio and logs, as everyone is either dead or contacting you from outside of the space station. And we get one such contact right at the start of the game explaining to us that if we manage to stop Shodan, we will both be allowed to actually live, but also everything involved with our own involvement will be scrubbed from the record and will be free to go. So with all of that in mind, Shodan is really the star of the show in many ways, which is why her character is largely known well outside of people who have actually played this game, because Shodan represents much of what is feared in terms of AI reaching a level of sentience, especially because she regularly interacts with the player following you around the station, making it very clear how she feels about both you and humanity as a whole being insects to her. So needless to say, a really cool villain that has stood the test of time. But from there, let's actually talk about a few gameplay systems, starting with the modular difficulty. Something to keep in mind about System Shock and its remake, of course, is that difficulty at this time in video games wasn't as tutorialized, so to speak, meaning that much of it didn't really hold your hand, and the remake here is exactly in that vein. For the most part, when you wake wake up, you're free to do or explore at your own pace, learning as you go and figuring out how things work. Much of the game is designed around that, and while there are small tutorials here and there to help you out, for the most part it's up to you. Because of that, there are a variety of difficulty options that will affect things like combat, the overall mission, the cyber part of the game, as well as the puzzles. Each of these has an easy, hard, or difficult setting, with combat I would say probably being the most important overall, alongside mission as a close second. Combat is going to dictate how often you run into enemies, how often they're replaced on the level, and how hard they are to fight. The mission difficulty relates to how involved Shoden is in your mission, how frequently she is popping up, changing things, etc. And if we turn this to max, we only have 5 hours to complete the game, on top of it potentially being an Iron Man run in certain situations, which we'll talk a little bit about soon. Then there is the cyber difficulty. This comes down to our hackers' runs in cyberspace, which is a gameplay element, with the hardest difficulty meaning that if you die in cyberspace, your character will actually die. And then lastly, we have the puzzle difficulty. There will be occasionally puzzles we run into that we have to solve to access various rooms or simply continue along our path, and the puzzle difficulty dictates how complicated and easy to solve those puzzles are. So definitely important to keep in mind if you want to jump into this game. Now, beyond that, some other cool gameplay elements that I wanted to talk about were your HUD elements, as they are a little bit modular, but also require you to find them. Things like having a map available to you, or little things like your character's own life signs, etc., are all done by finding little modules, and if you're exploring, you'll find them, but something to be aware of for sure. Another big part of staying alive in this game is the restoration bays. Citadel Station is ultimately divided up into 10 levels. Each one has a restoration bay. If you die without the restoration bay being active, that's a game over. However, if it is active, that is to say you found it and stopped it from turning everyone into cyborgs instead, when you die on the level, you'll then be regenerated back at that pod. Meaning that on the hardest mission difficulty, if you die without the restoration bay for that level being active, it's game over permanently, which is a sort of soft Iron Man mode. Another thing you might find while running around the Citadel is lots and lots of loot to pick up. And while there are no NPCs to interact with, we can purchase various things through things like vending machines. But in order to do this, we need credits. We get those credits by recycling various weapons, ammo, basically anything you find into a recycler on each level, which rewards you with credits. That can then of course be used at the vending machines to get you access to various supplies. Due to the sheer volume of things you'll be picking up, it's also possible to find a storage elevator to help you manage your inventory a bit. But then we have the actual gameplay itself. As I'm sure you've seen on screen up to this point, it does involve a lot of shooting, which comes down to both more traditional weapons as well as things like energy weapons. As you can see under our health bar, we have an energy meter, which is what enables us to use various types of energy weapons, which themselves come in a variety of types, but some of the more interesting ones allow you to dictate how much power you're actually sending to them, and thus how much power you're consuming with each use, which of course dictates how much damage those things do, which is a nice alternative to purely worrying about weapons that require the use of various types of ammo. But broadly speaking, I would say those are the important things to know about System Shock, which is definitely not everything. However, many things I think are better left to discover on your own, as there are a few gameplay elements that I haven't mentioned much here, such as how going into cyberspace works or how the hacking part of being a hacker effectively plays out. But more than anything, I think the remake offers a fantastic opportunity for people who never got to play the original back in 1994 to experience both the atmosphere of Citadel Station as well as the rather terrifying visage of Shoden. So if anything about this sounds interesting to you, by all means check out the link in the description below. But that's going to do it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, but regardless of any of that, truly just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.